Hello, Cousino. All right. Let me fix my hair. That's important. Okay. I liked your response a lot. Now, the thing is, reading your essay, the most important thing overall in this whole video, really, is that what you emphasize in your essay. And this is what I've been trying to bring the conversation to. And I'll go into that in a second. But to be specific, the question not of do we have free will, but what is free will? That's the only question. In other words, this follows from my philosophy, which I claim is based in a skeptical epistemology, which is a scientific epistemology that all knowledge is theory. Following from the idea of us as a perceiver, we really are computers of the mind, but we're not like computers. I mean, neural networks are very different from computers, but metaphorically, we're a machine, we're biochemical reactions, so we're material is really what I'd want to say. So that's something we've deduced. What we really seem to have is just senses. We get sense input. If we're blind, then we can't see anything. You know, this is noticeable. If you're blind and lost all of your senses, how would you interact with the real world? Well, we deduce that you wouldn't. But again, we're deducing that we're in an object in the real world. Still, what we actually have, of course, is just these perceptions coming in. And when they're consistent, you know, we can tell from the senses. We have ways to tell illusions from reality. So anyway, so we exist. We are perceivers. Anything that gives us perceptions also exists, even if it is imaginary. I mean, the unicorn exists as an idea, so some things are just ideas. Now, free will can just be an idea. It can be this set of phenomena or that set of phenomena, but it exists because it interacts with us. I have experiences that I put in the classification of seeming like, you know, free will. Now, I don't believe any will is particularly free, and the terms that you've given about predictability versus determinism versus spontaneity, you know, they sort that out a little bit. I also like in your essay the idea of not being controlled by the outside as a definition of free will. I think that's true. And it leaves being controlled from the inside. And this is the only reason I really invoke quantum mechanics in my own argument. There's another reason I invoke quantum mechanics in response to many arguments of people that are denying free will right here on YouTube, that style that they presented to me. A little different from your style, but especially since you offer a definition by which there is will. Now, it's not entirely free or unfree. It's going to be relative. You can tell if one situation is more or less free, but you can't say that something is ever absolutely free. That's incomprehensible. You know, that's incoherent. Okay. Okay, background, yeah. Well, we can just stick with ideas, but I guess it is good. I do understand what you're saying. You sort out the concepts in determinism. But see, science inherited an idea of logical determinism, which I'll read from the Oxford Dictionary of Philosophy, their definition of determinism. And I think you'll see that we are within the scope of this definition. All right, determinism. The doctrine that every event has a cause. That's what you said. The usual explanation of this is that for every event, there is some antecedent state related in such a way that it would break a law of nature for this antecedent state to exist, yet the event not to happen. Now, see, that's where we're getting different, because you talked about spontaneity. Scientists have broken down these concepts of determinism as they face them in physics. So the reason there are these more fine-tuned definitions, these better technical definitions in science, is precisely to avoid the problems in the general concept of determinism. In other words, you want to do science without really committing to whether or not the end state of the universe is predictable. So I invoke quantum mechanics against people that are obviously, to me anyway, applying classical interpretation, and their determinism comes from a classical model of, and so I use quantum mechanics to point out, well, you can't make that conclusion anymore. Really, that's just an argument that quantum mechanics doesn't give us anything to conclude. Now, I have to admit, too, I have sort of a romantic, meaning I can't defend this, but I've just noticed that randomness is very similar to will. If you look at things in the real world events that can be considered random or will, they overlap. Now, the difference between them is the statistical pattern. In random events, you have a statistical pattern. In events that show will, there should be a deviation. I mean, that's one way you can look for life. Okay, I'm sorry, I'll continue this. Okay, this is a purely metaphysical claim. Back to the Oxford Dictionary on Determinism. This is the Dictionary of Philosophy, mind you. Okay, this is a purely metaphysical claim and carries no implication for whether we can, in principle, predict the event. And they say to see chaos. Okay, this is a distinction you were pointing out, because it's possible that something would be predictable, but we, with limited brains or limited information, might not be able to predict it. Well, of course, if something takes infinite information to predict, that would also not really count. But let's say it's not literally infinite, but just too many details for us to gather. It could still be determinable, or determined. The main interest in determinism has always been in assessing its implications for free will. However, quantum physics is essentially indeterministic, yet the view that our actions are subject to quantum indeterminacies hardly encourages a sense of our own responsibility for them. Right, which is what I was mentioning. Quantum physics doesn't really argue for free will. It gives a window, though, because it breaks the insistence on the predictability, on determinism in the sense of all of these ideas brought together. And also, yeah, the technical discussion about spontaneity. Yeah, well, randomness, when it's talked about, people say that it's random, the emission, but that it's a spontaneous emission. It just emphasizes that it's an event and that it's an action. That, two terms of random, are split out, and you only use random for the distributive statistics. Okay. They just say, see also dilemma of determinism, libertarianism, and metaphysical. They also have biological determinism, determinable, and these other terms. So that basically gets to that. So that's their view. So actually it does overlap, but I think you're right that the basic discussion misses some of these issues. But hopefully that was clear in the sense that, again, I'm saying that will and random do look similar. Quantum physics at least stops the classical model determinism that a lot of people seem to be presenting, and does, I think, present a place for will to exist. Now, whether it was an expression of something in matter itself, or whether it has to be an expression of matter itself or energy itself. Whether it's actually, like I said, coming up from the spontaneous emission of photons, I mean, obviously I don't know that, and I don't spend time actually thinking that. The possibility of it, or something similar, some other force or field that we just don't know, some other physics, it has to be physical, right? That it's coming up and it is able to express itself and deviate from what would be a random pattern otherwise. And I just noticed when you make a decision but you don't have a reason to, like if you were an atom emitting a photon, you have no real reason to decide one time or another. But it doesn't have an effect on you, right? The direction and wavelength, energy in the photon do affect your motion. But so what good does that do you? Because you have no senses. You have no way to process the difference in the environment. So all environments are, you're indifferent to what environment you're in. And then in biological molecules, of course, when you start controlling how you emit energy, it could have an effect. But anyway, I'm not proposing that, because that's a scientific thing people would have to discover. For my case, it's nothing more like than your robotic mind experiments. Okay. You also talked about how the laws of quantum mechanics are very regular. Exactly. And I think that at the very least we can apply this as metaphor to randomness in our macroscopic world, at least as metaphor. For example, it's true in quantum mechanics that nothing is 100% certain. So it's sort of a relativistic argument, support there. Because nothing is 100% certain. I'm going to have to stop this, and I think I'm going to just continue. So, okay, I'll talk about the regular laws of quantum mechanics in the next segment.